Today I want to focus on 3 factors that influence change. The first is physiology. Our brains, what happens in our brains that affects the rest of our body, and why it, well, I don't want to say that it negates everything else that we've ever learned about managing change, but it pretty much does. Physiology is really important. We're going to talk about why the brain resists change. We're made that way. But we're going to talk a lot about the sociology of change, or our group behavior, our tribes, our teams, our peers, and how what they do influences and impacts us. And here's the other thing we know from all the research that we've done is that heterogeneous groups that are different from one another, are more adaptive than homogeneous groups. So if you are with your like kind, you are less likely to be change adaptive and less likely to be innovative. If you hang around with people who think like you, guess what? You're going to think you're right. You really will. And you may be right, or at least partially right, but if nobody challenges you, then how are you ever going to think differently? And if we see the people on the other side of the table as being like us and being members of our tribe, or people who at least understand us, or people who share some common goals, or we have some things in common, then we're more likely to feel safe and trust them. The tougher the sell, so if you're trying to get somebody to come along with you, to move in a particular direction that they haven't moved in before, to do something that they haven't done that way before, to fund your project, whatever it might be, the tougher the sell, the tighter the intimate human bond needs to be. But what we need you to do is to tell us what you know in a way that we can understand it. And in a way that it means something to me. Because if you want me to join in and go pick weeds, then it has to mean something to me. And we need to aggressively make connections and earn trust. Earn trust. The way to earn trust is to do what you say you're going to do. Mother Teresa said, if you look at the Mass, you'll never look again. We heard about the Syrian refugee crisis, yes, and many of us closed our newspapers or even turned off the radio or the TV because it's so horrific. And we were just overwhelmed until one little boy was on a beach dead. One person, one child, and it's amazing the turnaround in this country. Why? Because we could see that one child. We could feel that one child. So when you tell your message, don't tell me how many invasive species there are. I looked on your website, I was terrified. I really was. I thought, oh my God, they're coming from everywhere. They're in the water, they're in the land, they're in the trees. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I can't deal with all that because I'm just a regular person, you know. But tell me how to deal with my backyard infestation, and I tell you, you'll have someone who'll be with you for life. One of the most fantastic things I've experienced while being at this conference, just since yesterday afternoon, is how connected you all are. I was extremely impressed. I told some of your senior leaders in the board last night, I said, to see industry and governments and organizations that are regional and organizations that are provincial and federal, you all coming together. And gosh, you know, I haven't heard anybody yell. I mean, except yay, yeah, yay, we did a good job. I mean, I hear people trying to find solutions together. And that's really amazing. So we need to build connections that will last. And I don't know, you probably run through a spider web or two in your time, haven't you? And you sort of wipe out 1/4 of it and you think you knocked the whole thing down, but did you? No. Why? Because it's so connected, internally and externally. It has internal integrity. Every one of those little component parts is connected to at least 5, 6, 7, or 8 other component parts. How connected are you? Thank you all very much. Clap for yourselves. Sit down. Build those connections. Face-to-face small groups work better than anything else. Why? Because we feel connected. We listen differently. We don't sit back and daydream or maybe do whatever we do. Autonomy is absolutely critical. If you want engagement, people have to feel a sense of autonomy. If I'm going to put my heart and soul into something, I need to have some decision making at some level. If you want people to get engaged, build their curiosity. So, if you were to say to me, Linda, what do you think the three most invasive species are in Canada? Well, I'd say, So now I'm having to think about the answer. So here's what we found. When you tell people the answer, they don't remember and they don't get engaged. When they tell you the answer or they search for the answer, they'll remember it. There's another issue that we have to face, and that is especially for all you really, really smart people who know the science that we're talking about, is you can suffer from what we call the curse of knowledge. That means that because you know it, you think everybody else should. And actually, it often causes me to move away, because then I feel stupid and I feel like I should know this and I don't know it. And so the problem with having too much knowledge is that you also stop looking for other solutions or other answers. Because if you think you know the answer, why should you look? The more repetition you have in your day, the less likely you are to remember any part of your day. And if you change one thing during your day, you're not only more likely to remember that thing, but you're more likely to remember more of what you do during the day. So if you have memory problems, at least once a week, do something different or do it differently. Just do one thing. If you take your lunch to work, one day that week, go out. If you usually take one route, take another route. Whatever, it can be anything you like, because just doing one thing different wakes up your brain and it makes it pay attention to what it's doing. And if we focus on something, it actually creates chemical and physical changes in our brain. You can tell when you're focusing on something. You've done that, haven't you? You've been focused on something and you weren't even aware of how long the time went by. Or all of a sudden you got an insight. You said, wow, yeah, I get that. Oh, wow. Focus is so critical. It's all about focus. And then if we can get you all lined up and aligned against those three areas of focus, imagine how powerful you can be. Expectations shape reality. What we expect to see, we see. Isn't that interesting? So sometimes it's better to have someone new come into our group who doesn't have all the answers, who doesn't know what not to say, who's just willing to say, well, that's not how I see it. I don't see it that way. One thing that I've noticed in this group is how passionate you all are about what you're dealing with. And I think that passion is what motivates other people to join you. Passion will make you unstoppable. It means you can achieve so much. I want you to share that passion. Another really interesting person to read is Brené Brown. She does some amazing work on storytelling and how important storytelling is. And she says stories are data with a soul. So when you're giving us your data, give us the soul. And the way to give us soul is to tell us stories. And there are three kinds of stories we can tell that will really capture people. Stories that tell us how we overcame a challenge. This was a terrible challenge. We couldn't believe it. It was almost insurmountable. And we overcame it. Stories that show connections, how we're connected. Things that we did because we did it together, and we couldn't have done it if we hadn't done it together. People remember those stories. And stories about creativity. The things that we innovated, new ideas, new approaches, new ways of managing the issues and challenges that we have. So if you're telling a story and you want people to remember your data, give it to them in one of these three ways. And if you could tell a story that captures all three, that's a powerhouse. It's a challenge that we overcame. We overcame it together. And we came up with some new ways of doing things that are really going to improve our lives and the lives of the people in our community.